So for those of you who don't know me, I am Mark Phillips. I run business development here at Helium. I go by Fark Phillips in just about every channel where you might find me, Discord, Twitter, where else, Reddit, things like that. I've been with Helium for about 7 years, which is pretty wild. I think in February, I will have been here for 7 years. And so in my role, I get to work with companies like LoneStar and developers and enterprises and sort of everything in between to build complete applications on the Helium network, both on the coverage side and on the server side. So it's a pretty fun place to be. And Tommy, I'll let you do a quick introduction of yourself if you wouldn't mind.
My name is Tommy Remmert, LoneStar Tracking, CTO. I have been with LoneStar now for officially about 2 years. However, LoneStar has been in business for almost 9 years. My background is actually in physics, then jumped into oil and gas. Always had a love with IoT and difficult communications, difficult RF environments and stuff like that. So LoRa was just a super interesting technology for me. And, yeah,
I mean, there's nothing difficult about LoRa. I'm not sure why you'd be spending any time here. It's quite straightforward. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for the introduction. So I'll do a few slides here about Helium, and then we'll jump into the LoneStar specifics here. So let's see if I can navigate things. All right. So Helium, founded in 2013 by our current CEO, Amir Helium, and Sean Fanning of Napster fame. People might remember the name Sean Fanning. We've raised about 53 million in venture to date from companies that people may have heard of. So Costa Ventures, Firstmark Capital, GV, which is Google Ventures. Some interesting money from companies like Harvard Steam Boiler, which is part of Munich Re, massive sort of IoT using insurance and reinsurance company. And then most recently, Multicoin Capital and Union Square Ventures, who led the C round in May of last year. And that was really the round that sort of kickstarted the sort of blockchain-based build out, which has led to the massive growth of the Helium network over the last 2 years. So that's a bit of the background there for people who don't know it. And then, so the crux here of the Helium network is that we're going to talk about LoneStar's use case. It's very fantastic. It provides a ton of value to customers. But when it comes to the wireless component, Helium is really just LoRaWAN, right? So we use the LoRaWAN wireless specification. It runs on the LoRa sort of silicon that's built by Semtech. And so in a lot of ways, it is very much a LoRaWAN network, like you might find pretty much anywhere else in the world. I was actually just reading the Semtech, I guess it'd be Q3 earnings call notes earlier today, and I think they've got 150 official LoRaWAN networks or LoRaWAN network operators across the world now. Of course, they're not actually representing any of the Helium network operators in there, which is kind of interesting because a lot of the people building network on Helium probably have more coverage than a lot of these official, LoRaWAN network operators. But actually, really good read the Q2 or Q3 earnings from Semtech. I'd recommend people check those out. So the real innovation here is the blockchain and the incentive-built network, and this has enabled us to build what is the largest public LPWAN in the United States in just about 12 months, maybe even less than that. And so I'm going to attempt to switch what I'm sharing here. And let's see, show explorer.helium.com. So this is, can we see that? People seeing Explorer?
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, okay, so when possible, I always like to use browser-based things because if we're actually telling a good story with what's in the browser, then we don't really need slides. So if anyone hasn't actually seen explorer.helium.com, so this is the primary sort of home for all public data on the Helium network. And so we've been doing a ton of work to this. It probably gets the most traffic out of any asset in the entire community. So I'd encourage people to head over to explorer.helium.com, and you can see some really interesting and fantastic stats here. So for example, we're up to 13.7 thousand hotspots. The blockchain block times are over here, which is quite stable and quite remarkable for a 13,000 node network of things that are processing transactions. There's a price, $1.32. We're doing this thing called halving, and we spent about 102 million data credits, 103 million data credits over the last 30 days. And the data credits really tie into how companies like LoneStar are using the network. And then just to sort of demonstrate what the coverage map looks like, because this has really been coming along very, very exceptionally quite recently. If we take a look at it somewhere like, actually the better way to do it is to go here and check out Austin. And yeah, so if you're looking to see what sort of coverage is in a city where you might live and where you might want to deploy a gateway or a miner, Explorer is a fantastic tool. So highly recommend people check out explore.helium.com, but know that it's getting a ton of development. There's a full team working on it now, and the community actually is doing a remarkable amount of development. This is all developed in the open on GitHub, and it's quite a fantastic project. So the best way to look at Helium and how fast we're growing, and you know, the amount of data that's flying across in the form of sort of data credits is to go to Explore. Okay, so with that shameless plug, I'm going to jump back into the slides here. And did that work? Are we seeing slides?
Yep, looks good.
Oh man, we are running good here, Tommy. Okay, all right. So that's really the crux of what we built here, right? It's the innovation that the Helium blockchain and this incentivization mechanism and this token HNT have sort of incentivized the network side to be built out, right? The idea that there's thousands of operators running 13,700 and soon many more than that Lorawan gateways, and then it's brought to the table companies like LoneStar, right? People that are looking for the ability to use a Lorawan network and to send data out of locations, and Tommy's going to talk about this. And so what's great about having LoneStar is that they really marry the sort of supply side, which is the coverage, and the demand side, which is the applications. And as Tommy will sort of get into, they are building coverage actively for the applications that they're sort of putting on the network and contributing to the build out. And this is a process that we're starting to see pretty frequently. So if you're up for it, Tommy, I'll kick it over to you. I'll start doing some sort of slide navigation. Just give me sort of a heads up and a nod when you want me to move forward. Full disclosure, I'm going to ask you some questions as we move through this. Yeah. So yeah, fire away.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. So as mentioned, yeah, my name's Tommy, CTO of LoneStar here. One of the things that I really wanted to mention here, Mark, you put a lot of emphasis on the growth, and that is what drew LoneStar to you guys, was watching how this network is expanding at an unbelievable rate. So as you can see here, we've got four core principles that we kind of focus on here. But one that I wanted to mention to everybody is secure. So back in the day when LoneStar had started here, we were conventionally a GPS tracking company. That's what we did. That's all that we did. But we noticed that data was being sent. Devices are being manufactured in China. They're uncertified on these carriers or on these cellular networks, and they're sending information in clear text. So we immediately were attracted to LoRa, and this is before our relationship with Helium. But because LoRa is inherently secure, we've got AES 128 built in. So for LoneStar, us joining and jumping on board with Helium here, it made sense. We were able to continue one of our core principles here, which was security, making sure information is delivered to that end user in a secure fashion. So, but yeah, we got together, and we're composed of about 10 people right now across Texas. All of us have backgrounds in the technical type domain, from electronical engineers to physicists and everything in between here. Well, you can go ahead and move on to the next one.
Alrighty.
Okay. So two things usually come up when we talk to people about our company. LoneStar Tracking. One, they think that we're in Texas and only in Texas, but we actually have coverage across the entire globe. We're able to help people here. And you can see that we have our feet wet in quite a few different categories here. Some of these are specific to the cellular domain and some of the more high bandwidth applications, such as you can see the 360-degree video here, obviously LoRa, because of the small payload size and other restrictions, it's not a good application. But pretty much everything else that you see here, asset tracking, animal, wildlife, agriculture, oil and gas, all those are domains that we have conventionally been utilizing cellular when it was available, or satellite. And we'll dive in deeper onto kind of some of the pros and cons here. It's not only price and speeds and bandwidth and coverage. There's a lot more that go into play. But a lot of people may not think of a lot of these different use cases here. Asset tracking, cool. You know, it's pretty common, run of the mill. Everybody's got something they need to track. Wildlife and animals, that was one of the things that really interested me. And we actually have a gal by the name of Christine, who's on board with us, who is a biologist from Texas A&M. And so we got our feet wet and partnered with Texas A&M, which is a university out here in Texas, along with Oklahoma State University. And conventionally, if they were tracking animals to, you know, take a look at migratory habits or whatever the scientists are studying, these tracking devices could be on the order of $2,000 to $3,000, and that's for one tracker for one animal. Now that doesn't even cover, you know, how you're going to get that telemetry or how you're going to get that data back from, you know, that animal. So to us, Lorawan was a very obvious solution, except for coverage. So now this is before our Helium days. So except for coverage. Many of you out there are probably familiar with networks like the Things Network or the Things Industry, or there's countless of private networks that are out there. But you just don't have the coverage. You just don't have the density. So we struggled with it, but however, we started focusing on more of localized tracking for animals, and it has really taken off. So we do have a department completely dedicated to working with academia and others that are focusing on the animal and wildlife tracking.
It's interesting. We see, so two questions I had for you. I'll ask you the second one first so I don't forget it. Or rather, I guess make a comment. We're seeing a lot of companies like LoneStar actually partnering with universities to do interesting things. So there's a few specific upstarts. One is out of London. They're called Stoffel. They're quite new, but they've actually been signing agreements with tier 1 universities to actually do Helium network-based development, focusing on specific applications. And I think it's a fantastic trend. It's super cool. The question I had for you is, so in these verticals, and you might be about to get into this on the next slide as I look sort of ahead, do you find that customers across these different sort of solutions are asking or know about what the wireless link actually is? Do they just not care? Like, are people finding you saying, hey, I'm looking for a LoRa-based SCADA system, or is it just, you know, help me solve this problem and, you know, I'll ship you what solution works? So
conventionally, people want easy. They have a problem, they need somebody to solve it. So a lot of times we do experience people just saying, hey, I need to accomplish this task, or I have this issue. That's where we come in and we specialize. We're in a sense experts in all these different categories here. So we can pick and choose and tailor a solution directly to them. LoRa, as you know, and everybody else on the call here, is relatively new. You know, when you look at the growth over the past few years in Europe, it's definitely a lot more known when we go overseas. But in the United States, it's new. Very few people know about it and understand it. So we try to guide them and point them into the right direction here.
Interesting. Okay. Actually, I'm now remembering a story. So early in the Helium development days, probably 5 years ago or so, we had someone come to us and say, I am losing something like 10 cows a week. And the guy was a rancher in Montana, and he had, you know, like 10,000 head of cattle or something. I'm not even sure if I'm making that up right, or if I'm saying that right. And he's like, yeah, 10 cows a week, they cost me $3,000 a piece. Can you guys help me? And I remember, or maybe $6,000 a piece. And I remember we spec'd out something that was like, because at the time we weren't using LoRaWAN, we were actually using a Zigbee module and a gateway that used Zigbee. 802.15.4 at sub-gigahertz. We did not use Zigbee. And we looked at satellite stuff and tried to make it work, but it was just too wild. So it was very cool to see.
I will chat a little. Well, actually, I can bring it up right now. I mean, agriculture. So on your point, we do have a product, and it's still in its infancy stages, but it's specifically for cattle. It's an ear tag, and what we started doing initially when we worked with the universities, and we're in Texas. There's ranches, whatnot, cattle. We started looking at the satellite applications, but there's problems with you know, power consumption. That seems to be the biggest, and weight. Where are you going to mount this thing? Let me show you real quick.
And by the way, if I'm jumping the gun here on this presentation, we can certainly move on and do it later.
Yeah, I mean, no big deal.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see the size of this.
Yeah, I think it's large.
This is a Lora collar.
Look at that thing.
Now, this is old technology, and I apologize if you hear my dogs barking in the background. The joys of working at home these days.
That's fine.
But so technology has been progressing, I mean, extremely rapidly. And it seems like every 3 months, somebody, Simtech, ST, somebody out there is coming up with a new ultra low power chip, whether it's for LoRa or Cadmium, NB-IoT, something along that lines. So it's constantly changing. But what we ended up doing is developing a new tag for cattle. And what we saw was not only people that are losing these animals, but what we're doing is we're monitoring a couple of key points here. One is, what is the location of these animals? Each one can have right now it's roughly $1, $1.20, something like that per pound that people are paying for these animals.
Okay.
So it can add up. But where are your animals? You've got them in different pastures and whatnot. And if you've ever tried counting cows,
Never.
Never tried it. So this, we've got a mobile app you can just flip open and see, okay, I've got, 20 head here, 30 head here. So the management is streamlined.
That's awesome.
Next, we're taking a look at grazing patterns. And I believe there is a slide later on here.
Yeah, we have a screenshot of it,
So we're taking a look at grazing patterns. As we're monitoring the movement of these animals, we want to know, where are they staying busy? What are they overgrazing, et cetera? Another aspect that we're focusing on is fence down situations. So, these cows, they take down a fence, they get out, they're in somebody else's pasture, or, something more serious, they could be out on a roadway. As soon as they cross that perimeter, we're able to notify the rancher that they've got a situation, and they can see where that animal is, go recover it, and whatnot.
That's wild.
Last one is breeding habits.
Yep.
So we're actually able to see, watch the bull and his behavior throughout the time, the breeding times. And we can get fairly accurate information off of that, just watching his behavior, to determine when he is bred and who he is bred with. So we can forecast, when that cow is expected to calve. So all that with LoRa and a tiny little sensor that has 10 plus years battery life. It's just amazing what has come from it. But I imagine
ranchers don't believe you, maybe, when you talk.
Well, it was difficult. This technology couldn't be where it's at today if it wasn't specifically for LoRa, because if you turn around and you tell them, I've got the cost associated of a cellular network, SIM card, whatnot. Now you've got the weight. Now you've got the power consumption. Bingo, right there. They all add up. And now you've got a device that looks like what I just showed you, something that's got to go around their neck. It doesn't add up. So we deploy these gateways slightly different than the conventional Helium gateway, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But it gives us huge coverage. On average, we see anywhere from 4, 5, 6 miles, a radius from one of our hotspots here.
That's awesome. And so if you're looking at, going, and so this is where I was talking about the sort of hybrid, like the marrying of supply and demand, right? Because a lot of people are just providing supply, which is great. And conversely, we have a lot of people just using the network. But, if you have to go cover, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 acres or something, and you have access to some sort of tower, which it sounds like you guys typically do, and we'll talk about this in a second, it's a perfect way to create coverage. It just works.
Yep, I agree.
So we did. You started getting into this, but we just have a slide here covering the difference between satellite, Cadmium, and Lorawan. I'm curious, have you? And so for people listening, you don't know this, but LoneStar and Tommy specifically, you can probably see his background. He's in his workshop there. These guys will build anything they need. They're like remarkable tinkerers, both on the hardware and software side. Have you built any satellite-backed gateways yet, or have you used anything off the shelf?
So first answer is yes, we have. We are hopeful when we do a deployment that we can leverage a Wi-Fi or an Ethernet, an existing internet connection. obviously not available all the time. Next one up is cellular, cellular backhaul, and then third one will be a satellite backhaul. We have a large deployment coming up in West Texas here. I'm hopeful, we haven't completed the site surveys yet. I'm hopeful that it will be basically a directional antenna pointing to a cellular tower, with an amplifier and whatnot. But if that doesn't work, then it will fall back onto a satellite.
Got it.
Satellite, we've gone down the list. I mean, we have utilized everything from BGANs, broadband global area network, to your different Inmarsat or Globalstar type terminal.
Yeah.
So we've got our hands wet and everything there when it comes to the satellite stuff. And
again,
we can choose depending on the situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've talked to a few. Helium has talked to a few sort of satellite vendors, and there's one actually, I think, in Lorawan, specifically Lacuna. Maybe I'm not sure if you guys have looked at
Lacuna. Very, very interesting technology. I highly recommend y'all take a look at.
Yeah, I think we've been talking to them. Okay, so I want to clear out a couple of these questions before we move forward because it seems like the chat is pretty active. So let's see here. Robert Grubb, not the best. So he's asking about HNT earnings and rack. You should, Robert, join Discord, discord.ag/Helium. Maybe Emily or Laura can drop a link to Discord in the chat. And that's the best place to ask those questions. I can tell you that no one's going to tell you where to buy HNT because that's not anything that we do in Discord. Charles Fail of Maui, if anybody hasn't seen Maui, you should certainly check it out. Asking, do you guys work with safari parks? Anything to do with safaris?
No, we haven't yet. That has been a strong interest of ours, specifically in other countries. You've got a lot of poaching and whatnot taking place. So we would like to, but we have not yet.
Okay, noted. Let's see. Ronald G, any application for the mining industry?
So generally speaking, no. Now, we do have a system for tracking location of individuals underground. And LoRa is actually a great technology. It doesn't use helium. It's strictly LoRa based, and it creates essentially a mesh network for passing communication or passing messages amongst one another. So we do have that technology available if needed.
Understood. Cool. All right, let's do two more here, and then we'll move on to looking at some hardware deployments. What did we see here? Okay, so Julio Barrios is asking, how do you do with cattle locators reading RFID in ear tags? So I guess, is there any interoperability with that? Are you guys working with that at all, or is it's a totally distinct system?
So it is a separate system. We're actually not using RFIDs. RFID technology exists, but it's localized to that animal.
Sure. Okay. We do actually have some people that are building essentially an RFID to LoRaWAN bridge, and that's been used in a handful of applications. So for example, there's someone at Salesforce that's building like a badge tracking application that you badge through an RFID reader, and then it passes through, I think it's actually built on a piece of hardware from Adafruit. It passes through like a LoRaWAN gateway essentially, or a badge reader that acts as like a sensor and passes that back over the Helium network that exists.
I got you.
Yeah, so it's pretty slick. Okay, and then Raj K was asking about the cost per pound for animal tracking, but it looks like Daniel here jumped in and said it's actually $1 per pound to buy cattle versus tracking. I imagine you guys price this as subscriptions, right? Maybe we'll talk about that, but it's all subscriptions.
Everything is subscription based. We have a cost, whether it's LoRa, whether it's Cadmium or satellite.
Cool. Okay. All right, so we got a bunch of questions queued up here, but we're going to move on. We'll take the next ones in a few minutes. So what do we got here? Talk to me about what we're seeing.
So as mentioned, we do deployments a little bit differently than your average individual who's going to put a hotspot in their office or at home. So what we decided to do was we have experience working with cell towers and specifically companies like American or Crown, and what they essentially do, they put up these towers and they rent space. You can go buy space. The space is very expensive. Let's just say if you get a 200-foot tower and you want a 1-foot area up there, you could easily be spending $400 or $500 a month. Obviously not going to make sense in our use case.
Sure.
So what we've done is we either deploy our own towers, which you're looking at on the right-hand picture there, or we leverage some existing infrastructure. The picture in the lower left looks kind of cool, and I actually wanted to explain this to you, and then I'll continue on how we're accessing these towers.
Yeah.
So back in 1950s, roughly, so, everything AT&T was running communications, and they had physical wires, twisted pair, connecting the nation. So what they ended up doing is they ended up setting up all these microwave towers, and that's what you're looking at there. Those are those horns are receivers and transmitters that are actually explosion proof if there was like a nuclear blast or whatnot. So kind of cool. But
That is cool.
anyway, AT&T built this network to cover America, cover the United States, and using microwave. So it was kind of the progression in the telecommunications industry. They had the conventional twisted pair, then they went to these microwave towers. They ended up decommissioning these as fiber optics was coming out and whatnot. So these towers were either destroyed, abandoned, sold to private entities or whatnot, but you can find them all over the United States. When you're dealing with one of these, again, it's usually a private entity, so you're not dealing with those ridiculous prices to access a 1 foot area on that tower. Honestly speaking, on this tower here, I think the cost was on the order of $50 to $60 per month.
Right.
So it's a lot more realistic. And when you're dealing with 200, 250 feet in the air, I mean, look at the coverage.
That's wild. Yeah.
It's wild. So, so back to our thinking of we're going into these remote areas, and a lot of the stuff that we do is on the agriculture side of things. So we're going out and talking to these farmers, not only monitoring cattle, but we're also monitoring water wells and the water flow, out of these wells. We're monitoring gates. Is the gate open? Is the gate closed? Temperature, humidity, soil moisture, pH levels. So we monitor all this for the farmer and present it to them in their mobile app so they can make decisions. When do they need to spray? When are they harvesting? Do they need more water? Whatever the case may be. So we can find a tree or something simple, or we can find a neighboring tower like this and get up on that tower and really open up our coverage. So fast forwarding here, what we ended up doing is partnering a lot with ham radio operators. So,
Nice.
I'm a ham.
Sure.
A ham. For those that don't know, it's just a certification you get to be able to operate a transceiver on specific frequencies that you have to be licensed to use.
Right.
It's great. You can talk to the International Space Station or whoever you want. But a lot of these guys are out there, and they have towers just like this at home. So it's a perfect use case. So we can get on board on those towers, and then wireless ISPs. These guys are out there to provide internet in rural, remote areas, and this is what they do. They set up towers. So it's easy for us to get on board with them as well. So that's how we're able to get a significantly reduced cost with amazing coverage. Now, the one on the right here, just a little description on this, remote area. So this one is actually for animals, again, but they call them livestock guardian dogs. And you get some remote ranches out here in West Texas where they're raising, say, sheep or goats or whatnot, and they'll have I believe they're Great Pyrenees. These dogs that are out there to protect the animals. But you could be dealing with, 5,000 acres, 10,000 acres, these huge ranches.
Sure.
So instead of putting a tracker on every animal out there, they put them on the dog.
Right.
So something like this allows us to get coverage, get coverage in that area. So a couple things here to point out. It's a 100-watt solar panel that we've got down there. Obviously, we have deep cycle batteries and a charge controller underneath it. We use MikroTik equipment, which some folks might be familiar with. They're a manufacturer from Eastern Europe that specializes in wireless ISP type products. So anyway, here we're looking at the antenna in the upper left. You can see an omnidirectional, the vertical white pole sticking up, kind of in the upper left. But that is our standard setup when it comes to these Lorawan deployments.
The MikroTik box itself is the one that's just north of the panel, right? That's like a foot above.
Underneath it, correct. So we've got a low loss, very short cable going from the controller itself, or it's called I think that's a WAP. I don't even remember the model number on that one.
Yeah.
But anyway, the antenna to the upper right of it, that's actually our backhaul. So that's
okay.
internet access. They have I ranch house
Sure.
type facility out on this location that has HughesNet. So that's how we're getting
Ah,
back here.
nice. HughesNet. Good to know people use HughesNet for something. I see the commercials all the time. I never know.
Still around. So so this is our big differentiator.
Yeah.
Is, the type of deployments that we go after.
Yeah, it's so cool to see. So, we see a lot of companies that are like seemingly doing interesting things. So, like gathering the sensor data and making use of it is certainly very, very powerful. But like a lot of people can build a tracking application, not to diminish what you guys have built. But doing the hard part of getting this out there, that gives you such a huge edge over anybody that might attempt to offer this sort of stuff. It's just so awesome to see.
Yeah.
Cool. And then for anybody who wants to get like super in the weeds and nerd out about building these sort of like ruggedized outdoor deployments, in Discord we have a channel called enclosures and something else, where people are just spending a lot of time like coming up with ways to build. Not, I'll say most of them are not as sophisticated as this, but they are very cool. There's actually a lot of ham radio operators in there too, which is interesting to point out.
A lot of it, when you watch the channel, everybody is, one of the things I love about Helium is everybody's trying to help each other out, come up with new ideas and whatnot. The only difference between, a lot of guys will use like a cradle point or something like that.
Yeah.
Work great, they just draw a little bit more power. But a lot of this stuff, like the micro-tick name that I had mentioned before, a lot of people aren't familiar with it because it's for wireless ISPs. So
yeah,
it's just
I can tell you. So I did just drop a link for everybody to micro-tick, MIKROTIK, the 2Ks in the chat here. It's awesome hardware. I mean, it's fantastic, and we've actually been communicating with the engineering team in advance of a software release that we're going to have coming out, hopefully to get them to support a future version of the Helium packet forwarder, and they've been great to talk to. So yeah, definitely check out micro-tick. So actually, on that topic, I want to talk more about, so let's jump over to the LoRa roadmap. So walk us through this, and then I want to ask you some questions about what sort of hardware you're using from the LoRaWAN ecosystem that's not homegrown by you, because I know you have a few components from some vendors in there.
Absolutely. Yeah, so our history with Lorawan essentially was we started with ChirpStack. We started deploying our own, those that don't know what that is, you can go right now and it's open source and you can download something called ChirpStack, software to run your own system similar to Helium or TTN. And it works, and it worked well for us. However, we had 100% of the cost, energy, effort, whatnot, not only maintaining the server, but also deploying these networks. So there was a lot on our shoulders. We do run 100% of our stuff on Amazon, AWS. So, we are redundant, scalable and whatnot, but you still have problems, you still have failures. So it was evident to us that we did not want to manage our own network. And that's when we ended up migrating over to the Things Network or the Things Industries. Awesome. They took the load off of our shoulder, which was great. But again, when we started back in the day, we were primarily tracking, just GPS tracking. And you've looked at the coverage. TTN and TTI would have been great if we were focused and based in Europe. But in the United States, it just didn't catch on, hasn't caught on like it did over there. So we were kind of in a poor situation. We would do a deployment, an antenna or a gateway deployment for every single device that we sold. And then, hey, surprise, you guys just bought a GPS tracker for a trailer, a car, whatever. Well, it's only going to work when you're in your neighborhood. That's it. So obviously it didn't work too well. We had been watching Helium from nearly day one. The growth and what Helium was doing, with the long PHY technology and stuff like that. It took us a while to actually get together and say, look, this is not a toy, I guess you could say. The growth of the Helium network has been explosive. You look at the map and it's just insane, which is great. So it was a no-brainer for us. We didn't like, coming from ChirpStack, coming from TTN side of things, our costs were minimized. So it was a negative to us. Why should we be paying Helium, for this coverage, if we're the ones deploying it and putting in our own hardware, whatnot. But what we didn't look at was the coverage and the growth, and how you guys, by incentivizing these network owners or operators, people are keeping these hotspots running. It's not like you got one up today, it's down tomorrow. Well, these guys want to get these things back up and running immediately.
Right.
No downtime. So our eyes were opened, and obviously LoRa is still a very small percentage of what we do today. Again, because of the coverage, but it's rapidly changing. And
that's
so
cool.
Our history with the LoRa side of things.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I mean, you guys have been in LoRa for what, 6 years, 7 years? I mean, how long has it been?
And not quite that long, but we've got a few years under our belt now.
Yeah. I mean, certainly much longer than most companies that have done, connectivity. So I want to focus in on this last bullet point here. So you were utilizing mixers or muxers, sometimes they're called, to run both TTN and TTI and Helium. So I think there's a lot of people, I know there's a lot of companies in this situation where they're running on TTN or TTI, or maybe another network, and they're interested in sort of testing the Helium network capabilities, not just the coverage, but also things like the APIs and Helium console and the network server, which we call router. And you guys actually landed on a solution which a few people have done independently of you, which I think is super interesting. Would you mind highlighting that just for 30 seconds?
Yeah, not a problem. So in short, before we made this switch, it was tough because our gateways, our TTN gateways that were out there, now we got to go touch them. If we want to go mess with everything, all our hardware now, if we want to change to a new network. So, and we had a new relationship with you guys. So we didn't want to go all in. What's the stability? How's this thing going to work? So what we ended up doing is what's called a muxer, or setting up a multiplexer. So there's a piece of software, and it's actually a part of the Chirp Stack package that you can get on GitHub. And it allows multiple. So if you have one gateway, that one gateway is going to use the Semtech UDP packet forwarder. It's going to send data to a destination, and that destination for us is this muxer. Once it hits that muxer, then it gets sent out to both TTN and Helium. So we're able to still utilize all of our old TTN hardware, networks, whatnot, and help the growth of TTN, simultaneously doing the same for you guys. Now we have Helium coverage out there. We can roll out Helium devices. And we've been doing this for a handful of months now. No issues. It seems to run great. Very, very stable software. And the biggest catch that we've noticed for anybody that might consider doing this is if you have a device that's on one network, you got to remove it from TTN before you consider putting it on Helium. The key exchange and whatnot. OTA.
Yeah. Actually, we do have so we have some tooling inside of Helium console that actually automates the migration from TTN, I think, over to Helium console and the Helium network.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take a couple questions, and you already covered a lot of this. Why Helium? I'm just going to put it up here for emphasis because I love this stuff. But let's take a few questions from the chat before we sort of finish this off, because we are running. How are we doing on time? Okay, quarter of 4 Eastern. So let's see. So Andrew Stein is asking, any application for insurance industry? So I guess the question would be more specifically, are you seeing, are there implications for insurance underwriters here when it comes to affecting policies?
Yes, but to date, not with LoRa. The only reason is because of coverage. We do work with insurance companies with a cellular or satellite type solution.
Got it. Okay. I can, Andrew, tell you that there are a few companies that are building sort of in-home insurance-based applications, or rather applications that feed data into insurance systems. And they tend to be in-home, and they're doing things like leak detection, smoke listening, for example. And those are using LoRa for backhaul, which is pretty slick. Okay, Jake S., are you able to deploy Helium gateways remotely, meaning pre-configured?
The short answer is yes. We could package something up and ship it out. But our deployment method is usually a little bit different than the average. We're going to go out, we're going to do a site survey because we got to figure out how we're getting internet out there, getting that backhaul. So it's usually a little bit more complicated for us. But if someone's sticking it in their house, absolutely. Cool. And if you end up purchasing one of these that we use, if you're interested in these microtics, they're simple to set up. You know, configure your backhaul, Ethernet, Wi-Fi, whatnot, and point it to your server.
Yeah, and Jake, if you're interested in sort of how people are doing this at scale, right? Because we have a lot of patrons that have 10, 20, 50 hotspots and gateways out there. Hop into Discord, ask questions in a handful of different channels. It's a fairly straightforward process to basically pre-configure this thing to an address where it will be in the future, put it in a box, and then have this person onboard it with a mobile app, and it takes all of 5 minutes. Okay, question from Eric Heilman. How do you plan on tracking animal migratory patterns for animals that won't be migrating through or near major cities? So I guess this is like, gets back to the discussion around building coverage as needed, right?
Correct. So it does get back to building coverage as needed, but a lot of the animals that we have worked with, they're migrating in a very, very small area. We might only be dealing with a couple of miles. So maybe migration patterns weren't quite the correct term. The short answer with the LoRa technology, if there's no coverage, you're not going to get any information. We do have onboard flash on our devices here, and after we go through your questions, I'll show you some of the hardware and manufacturers.
Actually, so perfectly. So, and Eric, there is a slide. One slide ahead that's actually got a screenshot of how they're doing grazing patterns. So I'll check that out in a second. And Daniel actually is asking, so when you're doing development of sensors, what's your preferred hardware software platform?
Gotcha. So I'll jump to those in a sec, but there's onboard flash. So if you do have an animal that leaves coverage area, it's still recording information, long position information, and then once it's within LoRa, it'll upload it.
Okay, so we'll talk about hardware in a second. What kind of accuracy are you seeing with Oyster devices? So the digital matter Oyster, which is one of the trackers.
Absolutely. So talking about hardware, just down. So you guys,
there it is.
There's an Oyster.
The Oyster.
The company is called Digital Matter, and and I will jump onto the accuracy. While we do build and design some of our own hardware, we're also very aware that there are experts out there that are much better at doing things, and when we need to focus on one. We partnered with Digital Matter a little while, I don't know, 2 years ago, something like that, a few years ago. And hands down, in my opinion, after designing hardware, looking at stuff that's on the market, these guys have it figured out. Accuracy, the chips that they use, so they use what's called GNSS, which is basically using multiple constellations. Not only the American GPS system, but you can tie into the European, the Russian, the Chinese, whatnot. So you've got all these different satellites to choose from, and it uses the information of all of those simultaneously to get position. We generally see plus or minus, with a proper installation, plus or minus 5 feet. These things are great. We stand behind them, and this is our most popular product, whether it be LoRa or cellular based.
Because they have a cellular version too. Yeah, that's right.
Yep, it is a great product.
Nice. Okay, so you use Digital Matter, you use MikroTik. Anything else in the LoRaWAN ecosystem that you guys are using?
So in short, we do a lot of rapid prototyping. So we're 3D printing enclosures. We're big fans of Python. Just again, rapid prototyping. So many of you are probably familiar with, and I can never ever pronounce the name of this, Dragino.
I think that's about as close as anyone gets.
So they make great products that are affordable, that are easy to use and easy to customize, and it's open source. So when we're in our rapid prototyping phase, that's usually what we'll grab is something like that off the shelf. Get a proof of concept, and then we'll take it a step further and we design our own boards. For example, here's one that's about to come out. So we're big fans of ST Micro. So we kind of focus on them when it comes to different components on the board, whether it be your application processor or accelerometers or your LoRa chip or whatever. So we're big fans of those guys. That's kind of how we work.
Okay, all right. So we've got 2 screenshots up. Oh no, too bad. What's wrong, Howard? We've got 2 screenshots up here. Can you walk us through what these are?
Sure. Yep. So these are just some examples. On the left here is our tracking software. So yeah, this is what we use, whether it's going to be a, like somebody mentioned, an oyster, a LoRa or cellular-based oyster, whether doing fleet or whatnot. This is our tracking application. What is the location of your asset? Where has it been? Where it's going? We do a lot of stuff in the background as far as calculating fuel consumption, killing the engine if we need to remotely. The end user has that capability and whatnot. So, just kind of a quick visual. There goes the dogs again. I apologize.
It's all right.
On the right-hand side, we already touched on this on the cattle side of things, and the grazing pattern. So this is just a heat map of a ranch when we were doing some prototype testing. And you can see, you see the hot spots. You see where these cattle have spent a lot of their time.
Yeah.
So it's very clear, I guess.
How big is that space? Like the whole
So
picture.
this one right here, we're looking at about 100 acres.
Okay, so not small. I mean, that seems not small to me, but I think someone like you, it's small. Like 100 acres is nothing.
Well, it doesn't matter to us if these people have a 20-acre plot or whatnot.
Yeah.
Sure. If it's going to solve a problem, if it's going to help them, then that's it. So either way, we're able to identify these sweet spots and find out why they're spending time here, and or do we need to plant something different next year or whatnot.
That's pretty wild.
So yeah, kind of cool.
Yeah, nice. Okay. All right. So I think with that, we'll just jump into some sort of formal Q&A. If people have them, I know we've been doing a sort of good job tackling questions on the fly. I'm going to put your contact info up here so it gets burned into the brains of everybody watching this, so that they can sort of get in touch. So I think there's a couple questions that I missed. Let me go back through and see what there is. And of course, if anybody else has more, feel free to pop them in the chat. I think we'll probably run for another 5 minutes here and then call it a day. All right, so Raj K is asking, does your business model include leveraging potential growth of HNT, the asset, or cryptocurrency rather?
Correct. Originally, the short answer, no, it didn't. But now we are very strongly considering it.
Cool, nice. You're not alone in that. There's a lot of companies that are sort of thinking through that, and actually some are actually putting it into practice right now, which is pretty damn cool. Okay, do you have a reseller program? Question from Chris Campbell.
Generally, no. We like having full control over our products. What I don't want to have happen is somebody buy a LoRa oyster and expect it to work when they're in the middle of West Texas, where there's absolutely no coverage. So by us having complete control over the products and whatnot, we're able to make sure we steer these people into a proper direction.
Sure.
However, it doesn't hurt to ask. There's my contact info.
Yeah. All right. Well, there he is. Chris, send an email. You're also in Discord, right? So people can go harass you.
Yeah, I'm in Discord.
Okay, so let's see. I don't know how to pronounce your name, unfortunately. Sever Einerson. What devices do you use for agriculture monitoring and measurements?
So the majority of them are units that we've designed ourselves. However, when we got started, we used the, again, Dragino, or however it's pronounced, we use their product line. They sell literally off the shelf, affordable devices that are ready to go. So we still use them for tank level, water level monitoring. We use them for our flow monitoring for water wells and just measuring water consumption. Do we have a break in a pipe or anything like that? So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. You are welcome, Saivar. That's how you pronounce your name. All right. And let's see. What was the detail you mentioned on water monitoring? I think somebody missed it.
Not a problem. So for the flow monitoring, we use a product from Dragino.
Okay.
Many of the water monitors, water meters that are available on the market, or electric meters on your house, there is going to be some type of output on that meter. In our case, we're looking at a pulse. We're looking at a square wave that comes off of this unit here. Some of these meters that you'll run out there will have like an infrared LED or maybe it's visible spectrum, but something like that. So there's lots of meters out there to choose from. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So there's nothing in the queue. I mean, I will just open it up to you. I mean, anything you want to ask me, or anything sort of on your mind about Helium or Lorawan or Cowboys football? I mean, what's that? Anything you want to talk about?
Oh, man. No, it's been great. Yeah, I appreciate this opportunity. I can't tell you how excited that we have been watching the growth of this thing.
Yeah.
And insane. I'm sure you guys are staying busy and missing plenty of sleep. But jump this hurdle, and these gateways for people who are out there. If you're not familiar, one of the things that Helium has. Sorry for jumping in here, Mark.
Please.
Is the mapper. If you guys are looking, it's mappers plural. .helium.com. Moving. But it's an excellent way for you guys to see coverage. Now, take it with a grain of salt, because it still depends on your end user configuring in console a device to report information, lat long information, back to this system. But if you pull up Houston or California or whatnot, Austin we're still working on.
Yeah, but Houston is let's see. There we go.
Yep. So you guys can get an idea of coverage. So what we do with a lot of our personal devices that our employees have, we're obviously reporting LoRa data back to our tracking platform, which you saw, but we're simultaneously pumping it into to this mappers program.
That's awesome.
To develop a better image of what's going on with the network.
Yeah, we have people coming out of nowhere to start supplying data to mappers. And Kent Williams on my team actually built this whole mappers infrastructure, and he open sourced a lot of this stuff, and people are starting to collaborate. And it used to be just the Adu, I don't even know how to say it.
Yeah.
Lorawan names, man. I mean, we got to make this better. Adunis, I think they're called, or Aduni. It's a French company. They make that very, very like diesel sort of Lorawan coverage tester. And so that's where we started with the data. Now, using more of an open API, people can sort of just pump whatever they want with this. So yeah, I mean, man, I love looking through this, and you can see like someone's on a plane here, which I think is fascinating, right? These dots heading, who knows if they're heading north or south. And of course, actually, you and I had talked about this, Tommy. It's certainly not a great measurement of coverage.
Yeah.
If you're 20,000 feet above the ground, blasting packets down. But it's super cool to watch.
You're looking at, there's a beltway around Houston that intersects that flight path. And I've actually driven on that beltway there, directly underneath that flight path, and you can see my points have not shown up. So, one day, I think the oysters, which are what we primarily focus on, are just putting out lat information. Yeah. Not going to get elevation or altitude information out of the device, but it does need to be restricted at one day.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I think we can kind of end it here, give everybody their afternoons back. But I'll just say, I really appreciate you spending the time here, Tommy. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I think everybody here who has joined us probably found it super valuable. There will be a follow-up from this. We'll send a video around with the slides, and if you want more information, just join us in Discord. There was a link in chat earlier from Laura, and Tommy's information, which I can put back up here. Oh, I stopped sharing. So maybe it's a good organic end to this.
I appreciate that, Mark. Yeah, and for everybody, we're very strong supporters of educating and sharing. So shoot us an email, give us a call, see us on Discord, and we'd love to help you out or point you in a direction. This is awesome technology. Helium is driving it in the United States, and it's awesome that we're all on board this early.
Yeah, and thank you for being such a participant in the community. It's been fantastic to work with.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks everybody for joining.
Cheers. Take care.